So I thought I'd do a review of Tokyo Anal Dynamite by the the only band, or I don't know how to say that, and I don't want to try to say that, but it's the only band that would name an album that, or one of very few at least. It's a Japanese band to my knowledge. This album is from 1990, which is fucking insane. And they play what I can only describe as harsh noise grind. So we'll talk about it. First thing I can talk about is how absurdly ahead of its time this album was. It is. If this had come out last year, I would have still been pretty impressed. I would have said, hey, this is a very good piece of noise music. But considering this came out in 1990, according to the video of it that I found on YouTube, that is absurd. I mean, think of what else was coming out in 1990. I don't. What was the heaviest thing around at the time? Death. This is so much heavier than that. It's just impenetrable. That's the only way I can describe this album. It is beyond brutal. It is simply extreme. The drumming on this thing is pretty good. It's very fast, at times arrhythmic, but probably the most steady thing in the whole album, which isn't saying much. The vocals do like the same countdown at the beginning of every song, most of which are about 10 seconds. And that is a thing that we should probably talk about. Like, it really does question songs, because like it almost feels like the beginnings and ends of the songs are the closest thing we get here to rhythm, and it really does, how short these pieces are really does force you to look at it as a whole, as an album, and they really do feel like they're not really songs. I couldn't pick a single song out of it. There's like 60 of them. I am not going to go track by track because they're literally the same thing with slight variation over and over again, and that means it, while it is still this very fast, very punchy piece of noise and punk, it also is kind of like this slowly evolving thing, and it does make it into a little bit more of a piece of art. And the guitar work could probably be discussed. There really aren't any riffs, at least that I can make out. It's mostly feedback, and I can't tell at some points what is guitar and what is like feedback loops and shit. I can't even tell if there are feedback loops and such. It like, I can't tell if there's like the Merzbowie, like the harsh noise setup, or if it's literally just guitar, drums, and vocals. I can't tell. I also can't tell if it's like 20 people, because that's the only way that my brain can imagine this, or about two, which is more likely. Like, I can only hear two or three people, but it's huge, you know? It is a very wide, big sounding album, and it genuinely doesn't let up the entire, like, it's like a little over 30 minutes long. It doesn't let up the whole time. It just keeps going, keeps hitting you over the head, and it does not end until it just eventually, cuts out. The vocals are loud. I can't tell how many vocalists there are. It could just be one guy screaming. It could be multiple people. It could be, screams overlaid and shit and dubbed over. I think it's entirely live. It's certainly what it sounds like, with the fact that, it's not like it really cuts between songs. It really does just go from song to song. It sounds like it was all planned out beforehand-ish, and then they were just like, all right, let's record an album here now. It sounds like it took about as long to record as it does to listen to, is what I'm saying. And it's very good. It's very good. I heavily recommend it. It also avoids a lot of the problems that the more noise side of metal usually comes across. It avoids sound, like a lot of those sound entirely like they were just made in a basement to mess with people, and a lot of them do tend to get these weird meme followings. I'm talking about like Emit would be an example of what I'm saying. And a lot of them, even though I do like Emit, do tend to like become too lore based, become like people tend to change the context around them, and it really does ruin it for me sometimes. It also avoids the just sounding like they put black metal through a distortion pedal. The example I'm for that being Wold's Screech Owl. It avoids that too. There's plenty of people who just sound awful, and it does sound like some genuine, at least on the more mainstream side of the noisy metal, it does tend to be a little bit generic. But this album, it avoids that totally. It also sounds very distinctly Japanese, which I think is cool. You know, like a lot of some bands, Disconformity, for example, just sound like, and I love Disconformity, but like just sound like American bands kind of. It sounds very like Japanese, and I don't mean that in a weird way. Like it does. It's the yelling between tracks kind of. I can't tell what he's saying, but I can tell he's angry about something, and it does sound hateful in some cases. But it sounds like some crazy dictator's speeches or some shit. That's what that I'm kind of at a loss for words, as you can probably tell. And I'm also not very good at talking in front of a camera, but like, it's a very good piece of music. I heavily recommend it if you're into that kind of weird shit. Again, like, it doesn't let up. The screeching feedback and the blast beats, kind of the D beats, blast beats, like on the drums. Sometimes they're slowing down and like they go back into like almost a groovy drum beat, which I could hear at some points. Once you get used to it, you do kind of start to hear those bits. But for the most part, it sounds, for the most part, you can't really make out a rhythm. And like, I swear it's just the guitar is just him scraping his pick across the bridge, and then there's feedback, and then he just, this is most of what it is. It's repetitive, and it's not good in a musical way, but it is genuinely the most punk rock thing that I've probably ever heard, and I thought I should make a review of it. So here's been my very improvised, shitty review that I just puked onto you. Please listen to this thing.